Israel's Prime Minister and former Defense Minister join an infamous list after being accused of war crimes. But are the ICC's arrest warrants actually going to be enforced? And how would Israel's most important ally, the U.S., respond? I'll break that down and more here on Straight Talk. Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Yusuf Aram. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant are now fugitives. Well, according to the International Criminal Court. Arrest warrants were issued for the two last week, accusing them of committing war crimes in Gaza. Now wanted men, the move could pose serious diplomatic challenges for Israel and many of its allies. Much like the war on Gaza, the ICC's actions have split world leaders. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan called the decision a courageous step, while the country's foreign minister described it as the realization of justice. Rights groups in Arab states have also welcomed the ICC's move. Spain, Ireland, and several other European countries said they would enforce the warrants. But U.S. President Joe Biden called the court's decision disgraceful. Prominent U.S. lawmakers also threatened countries that complied with the ICC. After more than a year into the conflict, Israel has killed more than 44,000 Palestinians. And for more, joining me now from The Hague is ICC spokesperson Fadi Al-Abdullah. From London, Chris Doyle, the director at the Council for Arab-British Understanding, and from Istanbul, Mehmet Çelik, the editorial coordinator at Daily Sabah. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me now. Never in history has an arrest warrant been covered so much in the media, been criticized and supported and divided the world, basically. Fadi, one of the main criticisms coming out of the Netanyahu camp is that this decision is anti-Semitic. We've seen a lot of statements coming out from him. How do you respond to these types of statements coming from the Likud party and Netanyahu?
Well, what we can say is that the judges are elected by 124 states that are parties. They are elected because they have recognized skills in international law and criminal law. They are recognized for their integrity, for their long experience that would allow them to hold the highest judicial positions in their respective countries. So they act in total independence and impartiality, and they apply the law. For us, this is the ICC Rome Statute. There is a mandate that has been entrusted to the court by all the states, and our mandate and our duty is to apply this law based on the evidence and on the rule that are applicable.
Chris, Fadi saying the ICC judges are applying the rule of law and the Rome Convention, which the EU has signed underneath. But it seems that some European Union countries may not enforce that law. What does that mean for Europe?
It's absolutely essential that all states, all signatories to the International Criminal Court, the Rome Statute, respect the court, respect the court's decision. It is independent, and it's come to the determination that Prime Minister Netanyahu and former Defence Minister Yoav Gallant are guilty of the very serious crimes of war crimes, crimes against humanity. And let's not forget that there are many other bodies who have also reached very similar determinations. The International Court of Justice also found that there was a real risk that the Palestinians in Gaza could face genocide. And you've had all sorts of human rights groups, UN committees of inquiry also coming to these determinations. So you see, Netanyahu will always attack. That's his form of defense, to use this anti-Semitism cry. But why we are seeing this very equivocal reaction from European and some other states is that this is really the first time that the International Criminal Court has gone after, issued arrest warrants for what might be seen as a state, leaders of a state that is allied to most of those countries. So there's a degree of nervousness. Conversely, though, there are huge numbers of countries around the world who want to see if Europe, if the United States and other Western countries will actually abide by the ICC and international law when it is one of their allies, or whether this court is merely for the enemies of the West. So its whole impartiality, integrity is at stake. And it did the right thing by pursuing the rule of law and carrying out its work, its vital work, without fear or favor.
Mehmet, if Netanyahu is welcomed in a country that is a Rome Convention signatory, what does that mean for the Rome Convention? Is it over? And what does that mean for the ICC?
Well, I think it will mean that some of these signatories are not walking the walk and talking the talk, basically, to put it very bluntly and simply. But I think it will also diminish the credibility of these international conventions and rule of law and international agreements that are supposed to be in place to ensure that a coordination takes place among the members of the international community within rule of law. And those values that some of these Western countries have been preaching to the rest of the world, like abiding by the international conventions and respecting the international human rights, I think that will also diminish its credibility. That propaganda, or for the lack of a better word, that a proposal will diminish its value. And it will also, at the same time, I think, expose a double standard when it comes to preaching and imposing these regimes to the rest of the world. I think credibility of the international community is at stake if these decisions are not followed by.
Fadi, if the arrest warrant isn't enforced by a Rome Convention signatory, where does that leave the ICC? Where does that leave international law? Can the ICC continue after this? And what would losing the ICC mean for international law, mean for an international accountability mechanism?
There are multiple questions here. First, let me speak about the legal framework of the ICC. Since the beginning, when the states were negotiating the Rome Statute, the idea was to create a system that has two pillars. One is the ICC itself, which can investigate and, where warranted, prosecute individuals for war crimes, crimes against humanity, or genocide. And the second pillar is the community of the states that are parties to the ICC Rome Statute, who have the duty and the obligation to cooperate with the ICC according to the Chapter 9 of the ICC Rome Statute, including in matters related to arrests or other decisions of the judges. So since the beginning, the system is created on these two pillars. And states that are members to the ICC, they have this obligation to do so. In case of a violation of the obligation to cooperate, it would be for the judges to decide to make a finding to that effect and inform the assembly of state parties. And then the assembly can take any measure that it deems appropriate, depending on the situation. It's not for the ICC, but for the assembly, because this violation would be a violation of a common engagement of all these states. So that's the legal framework for the ICC. The arrest warrants, they remain valid unless the judges decide to withdraw them, and there's no status of limitation. So even though in certain cases, and we've seen it in other international tribunals as well, the implementation of an arrest warrant can take a long time, but justice is not stopped by the time passing. It continues to seek the enforcement of the decision that it has taken. Now, that's one thing. The other thing is about the ICC itself, which is, for me, a part of a bigger picture. The ICC is one organization among others that are trying to establish a better world, a world that is more just, where there is more protection for the victims. And I think that it's something that is in the interest, in the ultimate interest of all states and all populations, to have a protective order, to have institutions that are there to protect them and to sanction the violations to the human rights. We should not go back. We should progress towards more and better work.
Chris, if this arrest warrant that's been issued isn't enforced against Netanyahu, how credible does that leave the ICC or any other international court's actions against other leaders? For example, let's say Vladimir Putin's, this is an action that was applauded by the West, applauded by the US presidency. Are they just picking and choosing now what they want to enforce, or what's going to happen with that?
This is a really big problem because it's vital that we uphold international law. The reason that the International Criminal Court comes into play is also because of a failure of the major international powers to enforce their own rules, to stop that conflict, to stop the war crimes. And just to remind you that the ICC only dealt with, in issuing these arrest warrants, evidence of war crimes and crimes against humanity up until May. These very crimes are continuing today, and they've got worse. So it is absolutely incumbent upon these states to take action. Now, some of them have used equivocal language. Take Britain, for example. It said that we will honor our obligations, but ministers have refused to specify whether Netanyahu would be arrested or not if he set foot on British soil. This could be nitpicking over issues of sovereign immunity in a situation that Israel is not a member state of the Rome Statute. But even so, it's still the big picture is that Israeli leaders have been found almost certainly guilty of committing these very serious crimes. So we should also not only see backing up the International Criminal Court and these arrest warrants, but what actions are these states doing, like stopping arms sales, saying that they're no longer allies with Israel, that they shouldn't be trading in settlement products. They should be doing far more to demonstrate that actually there's a price for Israel violating international law, and they are going to hold it accountable. And at the moment, that is not happening, and the rest of the world is watching.
Mehmet, Chris,
excuse me.
Sure,
sorry,
Fadi,
but
of course.
Sorry, but I need to react to one sentence, and I hate to interrupt. I'm sorry for that. But the ICC arrest warrants does not mean that a person is found guilty. It means simply that there are reasonable grounds to believe that this person is responsible, but they are still presumed innocent. And it's only after a trial that the ICC can say that a person is guilty or not.
Very important nuance. And Mehmet, when we listen to what Fadi just said, that this doesn't mean he's guilty, this just means that he needs to stand trial, why is the West, at least some European countries, so nervous of even having Netanyahu stand trial? I think Chris touched upon it also a little. They may be concerned that maybe one day that might be used against them. Is that the case? And how geopolitical is this? How much of a backlash are we seeing against the decision, besides geopolitics, from a legal perspective? Because we've been hearing a lot of geopolitics, but we really haven't heard anyone judicially attack these decisions.
Well, I mean, I agree with what Fadi just said in terms of how the ICC deals with these cases, and it is an important nuance to highlight. But I think when it comes to the genocidal actions have been taking place in Gaza and beyond by the Israeli state, I think those who those who disagree are either have something that the rest of the world does not see, or they're supporting Israel regardless of the actions for some other reasons. I think those who are standing against this decision or similar decisions or similar argument standpoints, they are, when compared to those who agree with what Israel is doing, is a genocidal, or at least it is against international human rights. It is in violation of many conventions. Those who disagree are now, in my opinion, are marginalized. They are very radical voices, in my opinion, that they can actually stand there and disagree that bombing civilians, targeting schools and hospitals is something that can be done, even though all the other international conventions are being violated in the name of self-defense, when this is not the case. So it is one thing to say that, yes, of course, everyone is proven innocent until everyone is innocent until proven guilty. But when this is on the book, but when the pictures, when all the evidence is suggesting otherwise, yes, we should follow the procedures to make sure that that respectability of the institution is protected. But when the rest of the world sees a picture, when they are talking about a picture, when they can actually unite for this genocidal picture that we see in Gaza, the remaining voices are only marginalized. Now, the reason why these are still taking place is, of course, not because there's a very justified reason that these actions are carried out, but the power plays at work here. Who is more powerful? We look at the forces behind Israeli actions and their powerful stance, their capability in terms of military power, in terms of economic power, is still far advanced when compared to the rest. And I think, the history and geopolitics, you said you want to put it aside, but I think history and geopolitical equations and dynamics are huge when it comes to reasons why the US is still supporting Israel, why some of the European countries are still backing Israeli actions, regardless of what the rest of the world and all the international organizations or the UN is saying, or when it comes to what the human rights groups saying regarding what is taking place against the children in Gaza, against women in Gaza, against all the civilians, or against the infrastructure, at the very least, in Gaza.
Fadi, are there any mechanisms in place, for example, if Netanyahu does travel to a Rome signatory country, where the country that is hosting him would face repercussions? And if there aren't, would you expect some type of accountability or some type of responsibility from the United Nations, or perhaps, let's say, the EU, to be able to enforce some type of repercussions for those openly defying an arrest warrant that are also Rome Convention signatories?
Well, as I indicated, there is a legal framework for the ICC, which is the Rome Statute. And in its Chapter 9, it indicates the obligations of cooperation of the different states, and also at which moments they may want to have consultation with the judges, and then the judges will have a final decision on all these matters. Now, in case there is a violation of this obligation to cooperate, then it will be for the judges to make a finding and inform the Assembly of States Parties. The ICC itself cannot sanction states. It's designed to investigate and, where warranted, prosecute individuals, but not states. So in case of a violation of the international treaty, it's the Assembly of States Parties to that treaty that have the possibility to respond to this non-cooperation in the way that they deem appropriate. It's not for the ICC itself. It's a common engagement. It's a common agreement between the states. And if one of them is violating their common engagement, it's for these other states to respond.
Mm-hmm. Chris, so Fadi's saying that it's not the ICC's job, that it would be other international bodies' job. Is anyone going to step up to the plate if this Rome Convention and arrest warrant is not enforced? Can you see anyone stepping up to the plate?
I very much doubt it. I think that there would be a serious battle to keep the ICC relevant at all. And let me just address this issue of about innocent. Of course, within the ICC, the individuals are innocent until proven guilty. But what we have seen from political leaders in so many conflicts is them determining that there are war crimes going on. That's not a judicial system, that's a political evaluation, and that therefore they take subsequent actions. And we haven't seen this. We haven't seen the political reaction to the ICC saying there's reasonable grounds that war crimes and crimes against humanity are going on. We haven't seen a political reaction to the ICJ determining that there should be provisional measures and insisting Israel adheres to it. So the utter failure of major powers to actually ensure international law enforced is really, the bigger picture into which their attitude towards the ICC must be seen. They are not insisting that Israel abides by it. And there's history to this. This is not, the first time. It's been a long-term issue. And I think there are also questions for the ICC. Is this the end? The prosecutor said that there may be others. We've had also consistent violations of the Rome Statute in terms of settlements. The building of settlements in the West Bank, illegal and a violation of the Rome Statute. How long can that continue without some action from the court there as well. And of course, it's under political pressure. We've seen that. We've seen the United States put it under political pressure, the threats of sanctions, even, this notion that the US could use force to take a suspect who had been actually detained in The Hague. We have to allow the ICC to do its work, but major international actors in the meantime have to ensure that these violations of international law aren't taking place. They can't wait for a court determination further down the line in a year or two, when that takes process. So they need to stop it now. That's really urgent.
Mm-hmm. Mehmet, we saw U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham's reaction, and his reaction was basically, we'll sanction anyone who tries to enforce this decision. Now, in Turkey, the decision has been applauded. The Turks are saying we will enforce the decision. How do you see this playing out, for example, if an American ally does go about arresting him, or multiple countries say that we are going to arrest him? Can the U.S. actually go forward with this threat? Is that even feasible?
Well, the U.S. can threaten, of course, and can also take unilateral actions towards, it seems like, towards anyone that they wish that they would like to do so. I think this is where we should draw a line as the members of the international community, whether this is a world of justice, or whether we want a just world, or we want a world that the powerful's actions are not held accountable. The U.S., Turkey is not a part of this Rome's convention, but it has been voicing its, all the concerns regarding what's taking place in Gaza, and this concern about the issues in Palestine that did not begin, of course, with the October 7 incidents last year. Turkey, Israel, Palestine issue, or the oppression or the occupation is not a partisan issue for the Turkish public or Turkish state in general. So Turkey will continue to stand firm when it comes to being in solidarity with the Palestinian cause. But of course, it will face backlash. It has been since the 1 minute incident. I would push it back to that date, since Mr. Erdogan said 1 minute at Davos, and exposing the atrocities carried out by Israel for many years. Since then, I think that what Lindsey Graham has been voicing is not something that Turkey is seeing. It's not something new for Turkey. Turkey has been facing backlash for a long time due to its stand and solid stand with Palestinian cause. Mm-hmm. And if they would like to do so, this is not something that Turkey would change Turkey's position when it comes to standing with the Palestinians under the occupation.
Fadi, I think with the issuance of this arrest warrant, nobody doubts the independence of the ICC, but how much pressure can these judges take when you have powerful leaders and political figures like U.S. senators and heads of state in Europe making these types of comments that could be influencing them, that could be influencing or restricting their movement, restricting their personal financial activities with sanctions? I mean, what can they do? They're only people, and you have these heads of state that have the abilities and the capacities and the instruments of the state at their disposal.
Well, if you allow me, there is also several points also in reaction to what has been said. The first thing is that the judges have already issued their decision. And an arrest warrant, as I said, does not have a statute of limitation and cannot be withdrawn unless by the judges when there is a solid legal challenge on legal basis for it. So the judges have already decided on this matter. Now, there is still investigations that are ongoing. The prosecutor has already mentioned that he's following some other aspects of the investigation, and that may lead to other requests from the prosecutor for other arrest warrants or summons to appear as well. Mm-hmm. The third point is about the threats and sanctions. And it's not the first time that there were threats or sanctions imposed on the ICC by different actors, including the US in a previous administration when there was sanctions against the former prosecutor of the court and one of her top staff members. Yet that did not prevent the previous prosecutor, nor the current prosecutor, nor the judges from doing what they believe is their duty and their mandate. And for the court in general, we have a specific mandate given to us by all the states. We have a duty towards the states, but also towards the victims. We have to do it, and we count on the support of 124, soon to be 225 states that are parties to continue cooperating with the court, supporting it, and giving it the capacity to continue acting in total independence.
Fadi, Chris, Mehmet, thanks for sharing your valuable insight with me on a very divisive issue. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Yusuf Aram. If you got any comments, please share them with us on X at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.